Hi, I'm going to show the join as you go for the back of the silhouette. We're going to be joining the final row to the final row to make this pretty design of the back for the back of the silhouette. The silhouette is made in the front, armhole, back, and then you make the duplicate of the other side and move around to the back. So this will be the join as you go for the silhouette video. This will also help with any other join as you go information that you would need. Okay, so for color's sake, for demonstration's sake, I made them different colors. Now we're going to be referring to two different things, the working side and the joining side. Okay, so this is the back of our silhouette. I'm not going to move things. This is the chain where we started. This is the armhole, and this is the back, and this is where it slopes down, where you'll be putting that pretty lace so it laces up the back. Now here are this decreases, and so here are your leftover, and it'll be different for different sizes. Here are your leftover full clusters. So see, these aren't full clusters. These are just where you double crocheted and turned. You did 2 double crochets and you turned. So we're looking at the full clusters all the way down to the bottom. And then here is the other color that I made so that we can look at how to join these. And see, here's the slope in the back. Now your pieces need to be duplicates. They need to have the same amount of clusters in them. Okay, so I will need to finish this cluster because this isn't the one I'm going to work with. And this will stay your 10 hook. Oh, this one isn't a final cluster. Okay, so this is finished because we ended at the top and we ended with that double crochet, so we would just tie this off. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to leave that. Okay, so this one, you finish one, and then before you're done with your last row of your second piece, before you're done, you're going to begin to join them. So this is going to be, yellow will be my working piece. Okay, I haven't done the last row of my working piece. That's why I'm not up here at the neckline. So before you do your last row, this is when you join. All right, so now this ends with a full cluster instead of, see how the bottom is every other row is a V-stitch and a cluster and a V-stitch. Now you can join V-stitch to V-stitch. It's best if you can join cluster to cluster, so even if a V-stitch would go here, you might want to do another cluster on the very bottom. Mine ended up that way, and most of them will, but if they don't, feel free to put a cluster on top of a cluster. So here is my joining piece. Here is my working piece. I have not done the final row of this yet. I've not done the final row. Okay, so I've chained my 2. It's time to put a cluster in. I've chained 2 and I've turned. So I'm going to make the first half of this cluster. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be joining this chain 1 space to this chain 1 space. And it's really easy. Just remember which is your working side, because this doesn't have the final row done. Otherwise we'd be up at the top. So we're doing the final row and joining to the finished side. So we have a finished side and we have a working side. Okay, so when you see the references, so we do the first 2 legs, we do the first half of the cluster. This one is a chain 2 and a double crochet. We do the first half of the cluster, and you will want to make sure that these need to be exact, that you have the same amount of clusters to join on each side. I'm pretty sure I do, not positive. So then we find the chain 2 space of the corresponding side, and we're going to slip stitch into the chain 1 space, and then we're going to chain 1. So now this makes our working side yellow, makes the cluster halfway done on the working side. So we're going to finish the cluster by doing 2 more double crochets. Okay, so yellow is working side, blue is the finished side, is the joining side or finished side. It'll be referred to as both things. And I've got mine twisted a little bit, sorry about that. So I'm left-handed, so I'm going to have to flip this whole thing over to work on this. Sorry about this. So we're going from the bottom up, and me being left-handed is making this pretty awkward for me to go from the bottom up. So let me see if I can work on this a little bit. Alright, so this is my working side where I have not finished my last row. So I'm going to finish, you always do the part of your working side first, and then you attach it to the other side. Okay, so we're going to do this one more time, just on the bottom here. And so I did the first half of my cluster, the equivalent of 2 double crochets. Now I haven't done my chain 1 yet, because I'm going to join first before the chain 1. So I find the very first cluster. Now this is a slip stitch, and then you're going to I slip stitch to it, and then I do a chain 1, and then I finish my cluster on my working side, the yellow side, which is 2 half double crochets. So I do half a cluster, slip stitch, chain 1, and then the other half of the cluster. Let's do another one. Now see, the mistake you might make, and I do it all the time, is I go right to here because it's just out of habit. Remember, this is my finished side, this is my joining side, this is my working side. So I need to remember that I'm also making the final row of my working side. So I'm going to begin my next cluster, do the first half. Oh, sorry about the yarn. Do the first half of my next cluster, 2 double crochets. Now before chaining 1, I'm going to find, wait, let me see if I can get this better for you. Okay, so I'm going to find the chain 1 of the very next cluster. They're going to be joined cluster to cluster, and I slip stitch into that cluster, and then I slip stitch into that cluster and then chain 1. Now don't forget, I've got to go back into the same chain 1 space to finish my cluster on my working side. So as long as you keep your working side and your joining side straight, you'll do this right every time, no matter what type of join it is. It should tell you in the pattern how they want you to join them, it should tell you exactly where you should join them. So now remember, I'm still on my working side. I still have to finish this row. I haven't finished this row. This one is done. So I'm going to go into my very next cluster and begin and do the first half of the cluster. And that's 2 double crochets. And I'm going to do this join real slow. Okay, so I find the chain 1 space of the finished or joining side. It won't be finished on some things. And then I'm going to put my hook through the chain 1 space and slip stitch to it. And then I'm going to chain 1. Now I'm going to go back into my working side and finish my cluster. I'm not moving on to the next cluster yet. Okay, so yellow is working side, blue is joining side. Let's do it one more time. And I'm going to make the first part of the cluster, first half of the cluster, and then I'm going to find the corresponding chain 1. I'm going to put my hook through the chain 1 space, just like if I were going to work in it, and I'm going to slip stitch to that side and chain 1. Now I have to go back and I have to finish my cluster with 2 double crochets. So if you just remember that now see, they're joined. Now if you just remember that, and see, even with different colors, they look pretty neat. So they look how nice and neat they are. Now, even if you're joining stitch to stitch, it's a real similar idea, joining stitch to stitch. So I'm going to show you how we're going to go on and to the next cluster, and we're going to join stitch to stitch. So this is not how I would do it, but I'm just showing you, I'll show you on 2 different things. So I have to do my working side first. That's always the first part before you join. And we're going to join stitch to stitch. So we're going to find the corresponding stitch on the other side, which would be the first half double crochet. Now there's a couple ways to do this. You just slip stitch to the top, and then you would go right back and work your next double crochet of your cluster, and then you just slip stitch to the corresponding side, and then you go back and then you would go back and you would finish your cluster. So that's how you would join stitch to stitch. Now it does leave a little ridge, so I will show you, if it says join stitch to stitch, then that's what you do in the pattern, and if you're going to have to go by what it says. Now let me show you another way of joining so that you don't have, sorry about the white, so that you don't have, it's all I had. I'm going to show you how to do it so that you don't have a little ridge there. Now that ridge will pretty much pull out, and sometimes you want to know which is the underside, and you guys have all seen this. You guys have probably seen this done. Okay, so this is white is going to be working side. So I'm going to put another row on the white, and I'm going to attach this piece right here of the red. So the red is the finished, it may not be finished, so red would be your joining side and the white would be your working side. So that's probably going to be the terminology, but I'll just show you another way of doing this. Okay, you decide where you're going to join. Now you always finish your stitch on your working side first before you do your join. Now when you go to do your join, what you're going to do is you're going to take the back of the hook. You can't have a grip on there. It's got to be a specific kind of hook. And you pull it through. That way you don't have a ridge. Then you go right back into the very next stitch. You go right back and work a stitch in your working side. Then you're going to take the end and you're going to put it through. And I'm not very fast at this, but it leaves no ridge at all, no seam at all. And then you pull it through. Okay, so I joined. Then I have to go, remember I have to finish the stitch in my working side because I'm working a row while joining. And then I take the back and put it through the very next stitch. So I kind of use my hook as a needle is really all I'm doing. It's really not complicated. It takes longer. But sometimes I don't really like to sew, so none of my patterns rarely have any sewing in them. So that's why I do this many times, but sometimes I don't want an inside or outside, and there's no ridge here. You wouldn't see it if it were the same colors, and even if it isn't the same colors, it still looks kind of pretty. So and use it use it and see what you think. It's a little bit slower. So this is where you put your hook through, and this is what one side looks like, and this is what the other side looks like. You see? So even if you were joining two different colors, you would still have maybe an inside and outside. The normal way to join everything, though, if it says join as you go, would be to do the stitch in your working side, which is my white, which means I'm working a row and joining at the same time. And then you just slip stitch to the corresponding. So that's the normal, that's the most common way that it's done, but I'm just showing you a couple ways so that you have a few different ideas and options on how you want to join things. So I hope this helped. Bye.